And good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Franklin. I'm one of the two co-founders of NorCal SCI, which stands for the Northern California Spinal Cord Injury Foundation. Welcome to tonight's presentation on diet myths and misunderstandings by registered dietitian nutritionist Shelley Wood. She's got a very in-depth presentation all ready to fire up for you, and I have a feeling that you're going to really enjoy the kind of information that she's going to share with you. But as usual, just a few housekeeping issues that I want to go over with you. Everyone has been muted, and that way we could eliminate any background distractions. However, if you do have any questions or comments about Shelley's presentation tonight, we will have a Q&A session at the end for your questions. And the way that you can pose those questions to Shelley is by using the chat feature on your screen. You can feed those questions to me and I'll ask them towards the end of the presentation. Second thing, as always, these presentations are made possible thanks to a generous grant from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. So we are grateful to them. And finally, as always, we are recording tonight's presentation, and that way if you need to jump off the call at any time, or for those people that weren't able to join us tonight, there will be a recording of this presentation in your inbox first thing tomorrow morning, and also on our YouTube channel, as well as our video library on our website. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce Shelley. She is a lifelong advocate of nutrition. When she's not working with her patients, she can be found in her greenhouse or kitchen. She obtained her BS in nutritional science from San Jose State University, my alma mater, in 2012. And her master's in public health in 2016 from the University of New England. And she has been working at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, one of the top spinal cord injury rehabilitation hospitals in the country since 2013. She currently works in the outpatient clinic of the hospital, seeing primarily those with SCI, and also spends time working with complex GI issues in the outpatient gastroenterology clinic. She's also a member of NorCal SCI's advisory board, which we are just so thrilled to have. And here comes Shelley. Take it away, Shelley.
All right. So let's chat about diets. And I mentioned this to Franklin just earlier. This is not my favorite topic, diets, and I'm a dietitian. So, and you will start to understand why as we go along. I think a lot of it is because of the mass amount of information out there that can be very misleading and confusing, and just generally difficult to comprehend for most people. And it can be very conflicting. And so you're told to do one thing and you do it, and then you're told not to do that. So it's very confusing, and I get a lot of questions about this. It's been about 8 years I've been a dietitian, and this is never going to end, and I will tell you why. So we are going to chat about diets and disordered eating. I'm going to go into some of the low carb options that people are most familiar with that they've heard about, like Atkins, keto, paleo, Whole30, carnivore. We're going to chat a little bit about intermittent fasting, which is another big one. And then we'll chat about Weight Watchers and Noom, which are very similar to each other. And then chat a little bit about Jenny Craig and Slim Fast. Yes, they are still going pretty strong. Then we'll talk about what all these have in common. Then we're going to move over to what I call the more science-based eating patterns, like the DASH diet, Mediterranean, plant-based diet. We're going to talk about intuitive eating because I think that is especially important to discuss. And then we'll go over some current literature, and we'll do some question and answering, which I know we'll have quite a few questions about. All right, so let's chat first about diets and disordered eating. First of all, if you have a history of an eating disorder, I think I would like you to consider skipping this presentation. Some of the information can be quite triggering if you have an eating disorder diagnosed or otherwise. I do work with patients who have eating disorders, and this kind of information is not recommended at all in that treatment. I would get a referral to a dietitian who specializes in eating disorders to help navigate your way out of what could be a really tremendously difficult cycle that you're struggling with. On that note, diets are temporary. Our human body is not meant to be restricted, and our mind is going to sabotage it every time to make sure that the body gets what it needs. There is no such thing as willpower when it comes to the human physiological response to restriction, and the body will win every time. The diet industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry because human beings are trained to look for quick fixes for weight loss, and the industry has delivered on empty promises for years and years and years at the expense of people's health. Society's been very cruel over time when it comes to what the ideal body should look like. If you've ever gone on a diet, are you still on that diet? The diet industry has done a real disservice to you, and it's time to shift your perspective to eating to fuel your body and to prevent or improve symptoms of chronic disease rather than try to obtain the perfect ideal body type. Diets lead to unnecessary restriction, to binge eating, to what is known as Last Supper eating. If you've ever told yourself, I'm going to live it up this weekend and we'll just start again on Monday, that is Last Supper eating. And there are negative consequences in health and metabolism from this yo-yo dieting of going on, going off these diets. The information in this presentation is going to come from a scientific standpoint. Much of my information that I like to share with you is kind of based on the background of scientific studies. I think it is very important to base decisions that affect your health on what we have out there in science and what we've studied. I am not in any way endorsing any of these diets, but I'm just informing you on the safety and efficacy of them and possible long-term impact. Where there is something specific to spinal cord injury, I'm going to mention it. And then another thing is diets with the management, for the management of diabetes or other health-related complications like GI disorders, like celiac, any certain cancers, heart disease, high blood pressure, that they're not really discussed in this presentation. It's kind of more of a preventative measure towards the end. But I am going to talk about diabetes and eating patterns that benefit those who are trying to control their blood sugar. And we'll talk about GI disorders and things like that in the future. Those diets are what I call, or what is known as, medical nutrition therapy. And they are necessary to help avoid dangerous health complications. And oftentimes those diets are in conjunction with medicine. So let's get started. Let's chat about the Atkins diet. The Atkins diet's been around for a really long time, since the 1960s. It was created by Robert C. Atkins in the 60s. It is a very low carbohydrate, very high fat diet. There is no calorie counting, but net carbs. Net carbs are total carbs in a food minus the fiber. Net carbs are counted meticulously. And how does it work? Well, basically the body uses carbohydrates as a primary source of fuel. I've done a whole presentation on carbohydrates, so you should definitely check it out. But carbohydrates are basically from sugar, from grains, legumes, fruits, many vegetables. When you don't eat carbohydrates, the body turns to stored fat, which the liver breaks down. And the process creates ketones, which the body can use for energy. So it's a secondary form of energy for the body. There are 4 phases to the Atkins diet, starting with 20 grams of net carbs per day only. And just for your information, 1 medium sweet potato is 20 net carbs. So you don't get any carbs except for a medium sweet potato for the first phase of that diet. And eventually you taper upwards toward 120 net carbs once you reach your target or maintenance level. The pros, I'm going to point out pros and cons with everything. The pros, protein and fat. So this diet is mainly protein and fat. As I've discussed before, protein and fat can help suppress your appetite since they're digested slower than carbohydrates. Cutting carbohydrates also means cutting out an entire food group, which means less calories overall. And that has helped with diabetics and controlling blood sugar in short-term studies. The cons. So the Atkins diet is well known for being higher in processed meat. There are multiple studies, and I did a whole section on fat, a whole presentation on fat, and I talked a lot about saturated fat. but there are tons of studies linking processed meats and saturated fat to increased risk of heart problems and certain cancers. Processed meats include bacon, sausage, deli meats, and also high-fat cuts of meat. Because carbs are cut out of the diet, people following these diets tend to eat higher amounts of processed and high-fat cuts of meat. Cardiovascular disease, remember, is the #1 risk for those who have had a spinal cord injury. And these foods are directly linked with cardiovascular disease, which would increase your risk substantially. This diet excludes healthy foods like fruits and many vegetables, as well as whole grains that have really important vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytochemicals, and fiber. The big side effect that those with spinal cord injury struggle with anyways is constipation. This diet is a direct highway toward constipation. Also, this particular diet pattern can lead to electrolyte imbalances, which can affect your heart and your heart rhythm, dangerously low blood sugar, and kidney problems. High protein diets can be problematic for the kidneys. This diet also promotes processed foods. So if you've noticed, the Atkins brand foods are still being sold in stores, and processed foods have artificial sweeteners, processed ingredients, high saturated fat, and sodium or salt. Long-term effects are really unknown because most studies have only looked at about a year or two of people on this diet, and most people tend to fall off the diet out of boredom or other reasons. So we don't have long-term studies on this. And the next one, which is another popular one, is the keto diet. This has been around actually for a really long time, since the 20s actually. The low-carb, high-fat diet has been proven to reduce seizures in pediatric patients with epilepsy, and this is something that is done to this day to treat children with epilepsy with good success. The keto diet is mostly 5% carbs, which includes non-starchy vegetables and small amounts of leafy greens, and it excludes carb-rich foods like grains, beans, fruits, and starchy vegetables. 5% carbs, 20% protein, and this consists mostly of meat, eggs, and cheese, and a whopping 75% of fat in the form of oils, nuts, butter, and avocado. As with the Atkins plan, this is designed to burn fat by way of ketones by cutting carbs, which are used as glucose for energy. Breaking down fats for energy or going into ketosis takes about 3 weeks for the transition. There are some pros to the keto diet. So there is anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence is stories from people. They should take the word evidence out of their anecdotal stories. So-and-so had good success, or I had great success with this. That's anecdotal. The anecdotal evidence that we hear of is weight loss, less hunger because of the incredibly high fat composition of this diet. High fat foods take a lot longer for the body to break down. They move slowly through the digestive system. So you're fuller longer when you have a very high fat diet. Weight loss is also primarily from restriction of entire food groups. You remove an entire food group, you remove the calories that comes from that food group. So initial weight loss happens though by cutting the carbs. When you cut carbs, that releases water because your body taps into its glycogen storage, and this results in a rapid weight loss. And then if you go out of this diet and out of ketosis, then you're going to have a rapid rush of water back in, and you're going to have rapid weight gain once carbs are reintroduced. Okay, here are the cons for the keto. So this is really hard to sustain, honestly. It's very hard. It's stringent food restriction. It makes it hard to stick to. It leads to yo-yo dieting, which has been shown to increase mortality or death. You're either in or you're out of ketosis. For the diet to work without weight gain, you have to stay in ketosis, and the only way to achieve it is to meticulously count your carbs, and the best way to test for ketosis is with a blood test. So it's incredibly inconvenient. You're missing many beneficial nutrients like vitamins and minerals and fiber that come from the fresh fruits and vegetables, legumes, and whole grains that are illegal in the diet. This can lead to nutrient deficiencies and actually lead to malnutrition. Again, with the constipation, this is a common theme with those who've had spinal cord injury, and this diet leads directly to constipation. Increased risk for heart disease because of the high saturated fat. And studies have actually shown an increase in lipids or fats in the blood within 6 to 8 weeks on this diet. Kidney damage, increased risk of requiring dialysis because of additional ketones that the renal system has to process, along with the dehydration because of the loss of glycogen from the diet, which holds water. So you're really putting yourself at risk for kidney damage. And the paleo diet, this is another big one that's been out there for a few years. This stems from an eating pattern of our ancestors who lived during the Paleolithic era, which ended around 12,000 years ago. The Paleolithic people, women gathered the fruit, berries, vegetables, and men hunted for the meat. This diet is built around the same habits of consuming fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and healthful oils, meat, fish, shellfish, poultry, and eggs, and encourages that you eat cage-free eggs and grass-fed meats, preferably hunted by yourself. It prohibits eating grains, dairy, legumes, beans, potatoes, refined sugar, and refined oils because these foods appeared only after the agricultural revolution. The pros, so yes, it recommends excluding processed foods and refined sugars, which are great because those two things, processed foods and refined sugars, have been linked to chronic disease. And it does advocate for fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and lean protein. This diet is still better than the standard American diet, where most people are eating at McDonald's and Jack in the Box and Taco Bell and all the fast food and processed food. So even the paleo diet is better than that. And there are cons. So again, with eliminating entire food groups, which can lead back to nutrition deficiencies, boredom, and hyper focus on food. A lot of these diets require that you know what's in your food, you know where it came from, preferably from somewhere close by. A lot of them advocate for local, which is great. You know, that's fantastic for the environment. It's great to go to the farmer's market, but a lot of the food, the diets that I'm talking about have these rules that are so strict that you have to be hyper focused on what you're eating in order to stay within the guidelines. Grains and legumes are frowned upon in the diet, but these foods are fiber and nutrient rich, and they've been linked in research studies with reduced risk for obesity and chronic disease. So they should not be eliminated. Nutritional deficiencies that are common with this diet pattern are calcium and vitamin D because of the elimination of dairy or plant-based fortified foods, and it's expensive. A lot of the people that advocate for the paleo or the caveman diet really recommend that you get grass-fed meat, cage-free eggs. Those things are expensive, but they're highly encouraged with the diet. And also hunting is impractical for most people in urban areas. And then another one that you might have heard of is the Whole30 diet. The Whole30 diet is where for 30 days you eat whole foods from a specified list of allowed foods. It's a 30-day reset with strict rules to eliminate a large amount of foods and then reintroduce them slowly afterwards. The rules command that you have, and I'll quote, no cheats, no slips, no excuses, and if you do break a rule, you're supposed to start back on day one. This diet allows meat, seafood, eggs, vegetables, fruit, not to be eaten as dessert though, and fruit juice, a few legumes, only green beans, sugar snap, peas, and snow peas. It advocates for salt, vinegars, except for malt vinegar, coconut aminos, and fats for cooking with. And the fats are animal fat, clarified butter or ghee, coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil. A strong push for this diet is for organic, wild, free-range foods. No dairy, no plant-based milk products, no beans of any kind. Beans being a seed, legumes being from a pod. No peanuts, no peanut butter, no soy, no grains, no sugar or sugar substitutes, no honey, no alcohol, no baked goods. A lot of no. Pros. The pros would be emphasis on whole, real foods, even though it excludes so many whole, real foods. There are still abundant vegetables, fruits, although it only allows a couple servings a day and not as dessert, and low added sugar. And then the cons. So 0 grains, no grains. And in my carbohydrate presentation, I went deep into why grains are so beneficial, especially whole grains, which have a lot of B vitamins and fiber, which is so important for those with spinal cord injury to alleviate constipation. And also helps with weight loss. And there's so many other benefits for having a rich fiber-filled diet. So no grains, no beans. Beans are also rich in fiber and minerals. And the reason they use for not eating beans is because they have these lectins, which are naturally occurring proteins found in most plants that in very large quantities could lead to negative health consequences like autoimmune disease. However, they don't point out that lectins are inactivated by cooking. And I don't know a single soul that is going to try to eat raw beans without breaking their teeth, right? So that is a terrible argument that you can't have beans. This diet doesn't allow for dairy or calcium fortified plant-based foods. So you're going to need to get your calcium from a lot of leafy greens and probably even a supplement. There is high saturated cooking fats encouraged on the approved list. Saturated fat, again, is directly linked with increased obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. And vegan and vegetarianism is discouraged, strongly discouraged, and not Whole30 approved. The authors argue that you have to eat animal protein for a complete diet, but this is false because you can meet all of your nutrition requirements on a plant-based diet along with maybe a vitamin B12 supplement, and the benefits of a plant-based eating pattern far outweigh any diet like the Whole30 based on all the current literature that we have talked about in all these months. The science is out there. And this is expensive. Again, they're advocating for grass-fed, free-range, organic, kill it yourself kind of diet. But that's really not feasible for so many people. It's very expensive. And this isn't a long-term solution. So they suggest you do this for 30 days, reintroduce foods back, but it's confusing as to where you go from there. So it's not a long-term permanent solution. And then we have the carnivore diet. So this one gets me every time. And I have had patients come to me who've had spinal cord injuries, who have tried this diet, and it's disastrous, trust me. This is only animal products though. No vegetables, no fruits, grains, legumes, beans, nuts, seeds, starches, nothing, just meat. Most people who follow the carnivore diet also avoid dairy because lactose in dairy is a sugar, and so they avoid that too. The carnivore diet enthusiasts claim that the diet helps with weight loss, digestion, testosterone levels, curing or reversing disease, which should never, ever be said. You cannot cure a disease with diet. You can avoid risk and you lower risk with diet, but saying that's a red flag. If you ever hear someone say that it cures, that is a big red flag. I would never trust anyone who says that. Improving cardiovascular health, they say, and improving mood, energy levels, that kind of thing. None of the claims have been supported by research studies. The gold standard for research is a large population studied over a long period of time and compared to a control group that doesn't follow the diet. So you have a huge group of people doing the diet, and you have a huge group not doing it, and you follow this big giant group over a long period of time, and then you have really good data, and that will be supportive. But none of these have been studied by this kind of gold standard in research. On the contrary, studies have directly linked saturated fat, which is found in animal products, to multiple diseases, most notably cardiovascular disease. So I know you're hearing a theme here with cardiovascular disease being a major risk for those who've had spinal cord injury. These are long-term large studies that have looked at saturated fat and linked it directly with cardiovascular disease. Carnivore diet proponents claim that the grains, legumes, beans, and seeds contain anti-nutrients and that fruits are toxic, but there's no science to support these claims. But on the flip side, there's ample evidence that these foods are actually really beneficial to health and very necessary. The effect of a mono diet like this can be detrimental since it is a severe form of deprivation, which can lead to dissatisfaction with food and can lead to social isolation. It can also lead to severe malnutrition. Where I have seen it, it is horrible. Always be critical of foods, diets, and supplements that are curative. Again, Most of these claims are anecdotal and not backed by scientific research over a long period of time. It's really important that you look at this kind of thing when you're making decisions about your health specifically. Intermittent fasting. So this is another one. Fasting's been around for centuries. It's still practiced for religious reasons all the time. Ramadan, Yom Kippur, in the Hindu and Christian religions for various reasons to express social and political views throughout history. Fasting has been around forever. Proponents say that intermittent fasting is a good way to lose weight and also reduce risk for diabetes and heart disease. Intermittent fasting is defined where one eats normally some days and little to nothing on other days, or goes for a period of time every day without eating. Not all fasting diets are the same. So fasting can be 2 separate days during the week with minimal to no calories, and then 5 normal days of eating. So say Monday and Thursday you're fasting, and the other days you're eating a normal diet. Other patterns for this would be maybe a 4 to 8 hour eating window with 16 to 20 hours of fasting, or some other pattern like that. A popular one is 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. eating window, and then the rest of the time fasting. And fasting, they say, is water or coffee without anything in it, tea without anything in it. So basically limited calories. Unlike other popular diets, fasting's been studied pretty extensively. Recent studies have found that fasting resulted in weight loss, produced cardioprotective effects after treatment, like a decrease in triglycerides and LDL, and those were probably associated with the weight loss. Other studies have seen lower incidence of diabetes, reduced fasting blood glucose following fasting. Much of the studies are on the smaller sample size, and they require a bigger population and a longer duration of study to really truly know. But there have been some promising studies surrounding intermittent fasting, and it's been around for a long time. The cons. So the main key to intermittent fasting is to not overeat on eating days or hours. And I think this is the biggest problem with intermittent fasting. Studies have shown participants eating way more calories than they otherwise would when not fasting. Basically, so getting stressed, the eating window comes up, you eat, and end up eating more than you would otherwise in a day. This has been shown with multiple studies. Negative consequences from restriction are dangerous. Dangerous fluctuations in your blood sugar, disordered eating, reduced opportunity to consume important nutrients. So getting 100% of your actual nutrients, like your vitamins and minerals and fiber and your carbohydrates and everything that you need in a tiny eating window is really hard to do. And there can be negative alterations in your metabolism from this. Fasting can be dangerous for those who are pregnant. Those with diabetes, hypoglycemia, or very, very low blood sugar can be a big problem. And those who require certain medications, a lot of medications require food. So how do you take your medications if you're only eating 4 hours a day? Side effects are dizziness, lightheadedness, fatigue, and nausea. And as with any restrictive diet, once the weight is lost, there's an elevated risk for rapid weight gain once a normal diet is resumed, because fasting can lead to a starvation state to conserve your energy. And when this happens, the body's forced to tap into energy reserves, which can result in an altered metabolism, slowing down your metabolism, basically. There are better, more widely studied diets that support overall health and risk reduction for chronic disease, and they allow one to follow natural physiological hunger and fullness signals, which is what our bodies are intended for, with what we do. So talking about Weight Watchers and Noom, Weight Watchers has been around a really long time. Noom has been around, I think, for a couple years now. Both are pretty similar in their approach, as they focus on behavioral change, and there's a large amount of support from peers and a ranking system for the foods. Weight Watchers has a point system with a daily allotment of points every day. Whole foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean protein have little to no points, whereas processed, fast, high-fat foods with little fiber have a lot more points. So basically, you'll burn through your points if you decide you want to eat fast food one day. Noom, on the other side, it has a traffic light system like green, red, and yellow to label certain foods. There is homework involved, like reading about healthy habits to increase your motivation, followed by quizzes. Both approaches teach users about balance with motivation to lean toward healthier, more nutrient-dense foods. Both approaches provide support to users by direct or by like message boards and forum discussion and things like that. Coaches for both are not registered dietitians. They have nutrition certificates or something like that. Both approaches are a long-term commitment, and it's expensive. This can lead to disordered eating habits and obsession with foods, like worrying about points, going to a party, going to, one day you'll go to a party again, but going to your family's one day and they have their special food out, and then you're going to freak because you're like, I don't know how many points this is. And so it can lead to obsession with eating. And Jenny Craig, Nutrisystem and SlimFast, yes, they are still around and they are going strong. And let me tell you, Jenny Craig is pushing hard toward the men's side. They are really, really advertising towards men right now. And it's horrible. So this is a plan. You mostly eat their food. Simple restriction of calories, fat, and portion sizes. All foods provided and most snacks, plus some supplemental foods. I think Jenny Craig and Nutrisystem include online support or face-to-face with a consultant, with the exception of SlimFast. Nearly all entries are provided. They're frozen, packaged, or processed. There are pros. So easy to follow, pre-portioned servings, some support. The work is done for you, basically. Cons, limited support when transitioning off the diet, no maintenance support at all. The program ends basically when you stop paying for it. May make it harder to maintain weight loss on your own without training in planning and preparing your own meals. What do you do once you're done? Where do you go from there? Limited options for meals, limited plant-based options. Meals and shakes are highly processed, oftentimes low in fiber, high in refined grains, sugar, oil. Thus the recommendation that they have for adding vegetables and fruits to the diet along with their food to kind of make it healthier. Diets are a one-size-fits-all model, and it's expensive. You have to pay for it, and once you stop, you're done. So it can add up. Here is an example, and this is because Arash was wondering about this, and actually it was pretty entertaining to look it up. But this is one of their typical shakes, SlimFast shakes, and I'm going to teach you a little something if you didn't know this. This is an ingredients label. Ingredients on all nutrition facts labels are listed from the most prevalent thing in them to the least prevalent, meaning that this product here, the number one ingredient that is the most of what's in there is sugar. And then the next second highest is the sunflower oil. And then we start with the preservatives. So if you're ever curious what this food has, look at the label. If you want to know what it's mostly consisted of, look at the label, and the very first ingredient is what the food has the most of. If it's a liquid, it usually has water. So this here is a powder, I believe, and the highest amount in this per weight is sugar, and it's horrible. So don't drink this. What do they all have in common? I keep saying the word restriction. They restrict. This can lead to an obsession with food and a disconnection with what the body is asking for, uses outside numbers to determine what to eat rather than listening to your body. Monitoring food so closely can lead to a psychological distress, which can lead to shame or binge eating. Binge eating leads to guilt, which leads back to restriction by the same diet or another newer diet. I know some of you are thinking right now about how many diets you've possibly been on, and you go in a circle and you binge, and you get so hungry your body can't handle it, and then you cheat, and then you go back on it, or you go on another one, and it's like this endless circle. And I talk to patients all the time about this. There's limited scientific evidence for many of these diets. No long-term studies looking at impact on health years later. Constipation is a common theme for low-carb diets, and the elevation of fasting lipid levels, which can increase risk for cardiovascular disease, which I don't have to say is, again, the number one risk for you guys. Lack of nutritional balance, with one or more entire food groups are taken out, reduced completely, eliminated altogether. So extremely restricting, and you're missing out on important nutrients with these. So now let's talk about research-based. We're going to go into the research-based eating patterns. These are a little more comfortable for me to talk about. There's a little more work involved for people who follow these particular eating patterns, but the science is there, they're solid, they're safe, they're supported. So we'll start with the DASH diet. This eating pattern is the dietary approach to hypertension. That's what it stands for. This is a lifelong approach to healthy eating to treat and high blood pressure, which was developed by the National Institutes of Health to lower blood pressure without medication. It encourages a reduction in sodium or salt and an inclusion of foods higher in nutrients, lower blood pressure, magnesium, and calcium. Blood pressure can be reduced in weeks, which can make a significant difference in your health risk. The DASH eating pattern also supports dietary recommendations to prevent cancer, stroke, heart disease, osteoporosis, and diabetes. So it's well-rounded, very well-rounded, well-studied. A standard DASH eating pattern allows for 2,300 milligrams of sodium or salt per day. And then there is a more restrictive for severe hypertension, a lower sodium DASH diet pattern, which allows for 1,500 milligrams of sodium or salt per day. 2,300 milligrams of salt is roughly a teaspoon, just under a teaspoon, I believe. You may not think that you consume a teaspoon of salt if you were to look at a teaspoon of salt and you'd be like, no way. But if you're eating a lot of canned goods or processed foods, anything from the frozen section, fast food, anything like that, all of that salt is in that food. And so limiting salt is the key to this particular diet pattern, because it helps with hypertension and lowers blood pressure and lowers risk for heart disease. Both of these patterns emphasize fresh veggies, fruits, low-fat dairy or plant-based sources, moderate whole grains, fish, poultry, and nuts. The pros: it's evidence-based, solid evidence-based health benefits. It's accessible, flexible, allows for nutritional balance. It's designed for lifelong health, and it's backed by major health organizations, American Medical Association, and many, many others. There are cons. It's hard to maintain sometimes or get started. No convenient or processed foods. It's all centered around whole foods. No organized support. There may be support groups that you can find online now, though. Heavy food tracking, at least initially, until a habit is established. Just basically knowing where the salt is, that kind of thing. The more natural you eat, the easier it is to follow, obviously. You don't have to worry about salt in your broccoli and that kind of thing. It is worthwhile investment of time initially if you struggle with high blood pressure and you have a genetic predisposition for heart disease and you have a spinal cord injury. This could be a really good idea for you to consider. Another one, this is a big one, and this is one that I use quite a bit for my patients because it's very relaxed, very healthy, pretty easy to follow. This is based on the traditional eating habits in countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea. There's at least 16 countries in that area, and the common theme is plentiful vegetables, fruits, whole grains, potatoes, beans, nuts, seeds. Olive oil is a primary source of fat. There's low to moderate amount of dairy or plant-based sources. There's a little bit of eggs, some fish, some poultry, minimally processed, limited in sugar and sugary beverages, limited in salt, limited in refined carbohydrates, very low saturated fat, and fatty processed meats, totally discouraged, primarily plant-based. I would call this a plant-based diet with the exception of a little bit of fish and some other animal products. Fruit as a dessert. So I like this where you get used to eating. If you're used to eating cheesecake now and you switch over to having whatever seasonal fruit, right now is citrus. We're going to go into summertime really soon and it's going to be amazing. If you switch out your cheesecake initially, at first it might be a little hard for you, but eventually, especially if you start to buy seasonal fruit, that is truly dessert, honestly. It's the best. This is backed by long-term research as playing a role in preventing heart disease and stroke and reducing risk factors like obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol. So this is another really heart healthy diet that's been really studied over a long term with a lot of people. The pros: it promotes heart health, improves diabetes management and prevention, improved mental health benefits from the omegas, weight management, cancer prevention. It's balanced, it's flavorful. As with the DASH pattern, certain conditions may require guidance. All of these require guidance. If you have diabetes, that is something that you will need to do some special adjustments for. There are no specific guidelines to follow for the Mediterranean diet. Basically, you have a list of foods to eat and a list of foods to avoid, pretty much. Can be a little time consuming, especially if you don't regularly cook. If you do cook or have a caregiver that cooks, it can be a little bit of an adjustment curve, but after a while, it should become easier over time. It is a worthwhile investment in your time. And it is not expensive. It depends on where you source your food from, but it can be pretty easy on the budget. And we have plant-based eating, which is what I talk about like 90% of my life. This is also called the whole foods plant-based diet. And the primary focus is on foods from plants, fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and oils, whole grains, legumes, beans. Plant-based, meaning that most of your foods come from plants. So it is not a strict vegan diet. A reasonable way to think of a plant-based eating pattern is maybe 90% plant-based, 10% other, or if you're just starting out and trying to improve your diet, maybe start with 75% and 25% other and work your way up to 90. I'm actually plant-based. When I see enough research, it's hard for me to consider eating other ways, but I also eat other foods too, so I'm not 100%. And I don't encourage that you try to be 100% because then you get into the restrictive area and it gets hard to maintain. So this is similar to the Mediterranean diet, but it has less eggs, dairy, limited eggs and dairy, limited poultry and fish. Pros: extensive research. So tons and tons of research to support health, lower risk for coronary heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, improves longevity. They've done a ton of studies with the Mediterranean and plant-based eating patterns on length of life or longevity, and they are promising. Can offer all the necessary protein, fat, and carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals that you need. Plant-based diets are also higher in fiber and phytonutrients, wide variety of foods, no weighing, no measuring, and some cons. So it might be challenging to ensure that enough nutrients are met initially, potential for some deficiencies with really poor planning. It requires some planning and preparation, yes, a little bit of a learning curve at first. Vitamin B12 supplementation is needed. B12 is the only supplement. If you plan a plant-based diet right, all you need is a B12 supplement. B12 is produced by bacteria, not by animals or plants. Animals, including humans, have to obtain it directly from or indirectly from the bacteria. We need it from the bacteria. And the reason why people that eat meat don't need a B12 supplement is because farmed animals receive B12 by eating either fortified or supplemented feed, or they're exposed to bacteria in the manure, or they drink untreated or contaminated water and they get the bacteria from that. And then the people who eat the animals that get their B12 from those sources, they get the B12. So basically that's how we fulfill B12 needs. We get a supplement or we eat meat, and that is how you do it. And B12 is important because I've seen B12 deficiencies before, and it is a neurological deficiency, and it can affect a lot with your brain and your functioning. Okay, and this is intuitive eating. This is not a diet. This was created by two dietitians. Actually, it wasn't created. This has been around for ever since humans were on the planet, basically. Created by two dietitians, the term intuitive eating, Evelyn Triboli and Elise Resch in 1995. It's a different eating approach that has really nothing to do with diets, meal plans, discipline, or willpower. It is behavior focused rather than restrictive or rule focused. teaches you how to get in touch with your body, cues of hunger, fullness, and satisfaction. Babies do this innately when they're born. They don't have rules or restrictions. They just know when they're hungry. They know when they're full. And what happens over time is restrictions are placed on these children as they grow older around food and eating, oftentimes stemming from prior generations who lived through famines and war and food shortage and that kind of thing, and eat your plate, clean your plate kind of thing. And over time, these kids that are born to know when to eat, when to not eat, when to stop, what they need, this disappears, and they get older and they lose their ability to listen to their bodies. So imagine telling a small child that they can't eat for several more hours. This is not your food window, or you can only eat this tiny amount of food, or you can only eat these 3 pieces of meat when they're hungry. This is not going to work, right? Babies are born to know exactly when to eat and how much, and that would, stay with you for your entire life. However, society and the rules that diets enforce reduce the ability of people to follow their natural instinct, which is super unfortunate. Intuitive eating isn't a diet. There's no counting or restricting. It's based on 10 principles, rejecting the diet mentality that is ingrained in your brain, honoring your hunger, making peace with food, challenging the food police, discovering the satisfaction factor, feeding your fullness, coping with your emotions with kindness, respecting your body, moving to feel the difference, and honoring your health with gentle nutrition. Research has shown benefits such as higher self-esteem, better body image, more satisfaction with life, optimism and well-being, improved lipid profiles, and lower rates of emotional and disordered eating. So I recommend, if you have had a roller coaster of a diet life, I recommend getting this book and reading this book. There is a workbook as well. If you have a long history of disordered eating and jumping on and off diets and body dissatisfaction, I would recommend getting this book and reading it. Learn how to follow your hunger and fullness cues, and how certain foods make you feel, good and bad. That can heal your relationship with food and set you up to eat more healthfully in the long run, because you're going to learn what foods make you feel alive and thrive, and what foods do the opposite. And over time, you learn how to eat healthier because it feels good to you, rather than following rules of some specific diet. This particular way of eating has been shown to reduce risk for chronic disease as well, but it takes time and it's a behavioral thing, and I think it's a worthwhile investment. So what does the literature say? Well, I just recently came across this source of information. Paralyzed Veterans of America Consortium for Spinal Cord Medicine Clinical Practice Guidelines wrote the identification and management of cardiometabolic risk after spinal cord injury. Cardiometabolic disease is a secondary complication to those with spinal cord injury, and it can go unnoticed until it's too late. And the consortium reviewed all current recommendations and made a conclusion. This is what I love about meta-analysis, and when big bodies of research, like all this research is brought together, and then they do a conclusion, and they have concluded that adopting a heart-healthy nutrition plan that focuses on fruits, veggies, whole grains, low-fat dairy and non-dairy products, poultry, fish, legumes, non-tropical vegetable oils, and nuts is important. Avoidance of sweets, sugar-sweetened beverages, and red meats is important. They support adopting the DASH or Mediterranean diet if hypertension or other risk factors are present, genetically or otherwise. And then limiting saturated fat to 5 to 6% of total caloric intake or less. And again, saturated fat is found in animal products, and this is the fat you see on meat, or that is full fat or 2% dairy products or cheese, that kind of thing. It's also solid fats at room temperature. So if you have an oil and it solidifies at room temperature, like butter, saturated fat. And then also limited salt and sodium to less than 2,400 milligrams a day. Bottom line, diets have been around forever. The majority of diets are restrictive in nature, hard to follow long term, because the body's innate ability to fight hunger it's impossible. It's what we do. Our brains are going to override any kind of willpower that you think you have for a specific diet. The body is smart, very smart. Best way to eat is supportive of health, long-term and short-term. Eating patterns that have been studied extensively over the long term are the most trustworthy ways to eat when eating for health. Intuitive eating may be beneficial to those who have ridden the diet train on and off for years. Again, yo-yo dieting has been shown to have negative impact on overall health. It's almost worse to do this yo-yo dieting than to actually do a keto diet. This on and off is abundant veggies, whole grains, and legumes are packed with important nutrition and very important. Anyway, balance is a long-lasting, healthy diet that supports overall health, both physical and mental, a good bowel program, and reduced risk for cardiovascular disease and other long-term negative health consequences. And that's it.
Okay, Shelley, thank you so much.
That was a lot of information.
That was good stuff. Good stuff. Let's do a little bit of education sort of first. Can you help explain and educate us about obesity, how to determine when you have met that definition
Okay.
for as someone with a spinal cord injury? What are kind of the steps that you could take to at least say, all right, I fit that category?
Okay. So in the able-bodied population, we have the BMI. Okay. I don't like BMI. I don't use BMI really in my practice with
Can you
those
tell
with spinal.
what is BMI?
I'll go there.
No, okay.
So body mass index. This is something, it's basically a ratio between your height and your weight and your age. It puts together all those into a number. In the able-bodied population, a normal weight would run about 18 BMI to 24. Okay, that's normal. And then 25 to 29 would be overweight. Any BMI 30 up to, I believe, 35 or 36 is obese. And then above that is morbid obese. Okay. However, BMI, because of loss of muscle with the spinal cord injury, there is different distribution of fat and muscle, right? So you lose a lot of muscle in your lower extremities, and so your BMI is not the same. Another thing is, like, if you look at a bodybuilder who has a ton of muscle on them, then you look at their weight, you look at their height, you look at their age, but they're a bodybuilder and they have tons of muscle on them, and they may weigh a ton because muscle weighs, I mean, it weighs a lot, it holds a lot of water in there, and they would be classified as morbidly obese, right? So BMI was also created by the insurance industry back in the day to assess risk. So I hate BMI, but there are studies out there that are looking at spinal cord injury and BMI, and they're considering using a lower threshold for overweight as like a BMI of 22, where that would be a normal BMI for anyone who's able-bodied. So they look at BMI and they're considering 22 to be like a cutoff there. They look at waist circumference too, as far as obesity. And I'm still working on trying to understand what the recommendations are for waist circumference. And that is where you measure the smallest part of your waist. And with a spinal cord injury, you would do that laying flat on your back, and then measure around your waist at the smallest part. And I don't know what the number is for that right now off the top of my head, but I can get back to you. And then you look at genetics. So like what you have in your family, diabetes, heart disease, that kind of thing too. So obesity is it's kind of hard to determine, you know, if your weight, you're obese, but waist circumference is turning out to be kind of the most prevalent indicator. And I don't have the centimeters memorized right now where it would need to be, where the cutoff is.
Okay. You mentioned cardiovascular disease as being prevalent among spinal cord injury population. What would one need to do to at least identify whether or not they are at an early stage of cardiovascular disease?
Okay, so first of all, consider your genetics and your parents, right? That is always going to be something, even with a spinal cord, anyone really. Did your mom or your dad have high blood pressure, heart disease, cardiovascular issues, heart attacks, that kind of thing? Okay, because that automatically raises your risk. Then you add the spinal cord injury on top of that. And then what I would do is every 6 months, I would get a fasting lipid profile. Fasting lipid is cholesterol, total cholesterol, and triglycerides and LDL and HDL. The LDL cholesterol, this is the low density cholesterol one, and that is an indicator for heart disease right there. So you want to look at that. You want to look at your blood pressure. Now, blood pressure is tricky with spinal cord injury because of the autonomic dysreflexic nature in some patients above a certain level. So there may be blood pressure issues there anyways. So you want to look at fasting lipids. I would check them twice a year, probably. Just check to make sure. And then blood pressure for sure would be another one that you would want to keep an eye on.
Okay.
And then genetic risk.
All right, thanks. All right, let's start with some questions. This first question is from someone who's 19 years post-injury as a T4 paraplegic with obviously no abdominal muscles. And just like with a lot of people, they have what's called a gut that they want to get rid of or minimize. The question is it realistic with any diet, or is it something that I have to live with?
Okay, that's a common question. I get that all the time. So with any spinal cord injury, you have a loss of muscle tone in that area, your abdominal area, your muscles. You lose the tone there, and that allows for the belly, for the pooch. You can have a really healthy diet, get yourself to a nice healthy weight, and maintain it there. That would be ideal, but there's no six-pack ab there, unfortunately, because of the loss of the muscle tone. So that is the answer there. But eating healthfully, avoiding alcohol, obviously, too.
So within the spinal cord injury population, do you think it's practical to be able to target a certain part of the body with a dietary regimen, or is that sort of already impractical?
Well, with anybody, actually, with any population, it's really like you targeting a certain body part. It doesn't. It's doing okay. So doing ab work, right? Like you're targeting your abs, but it's not going to reduce the size. So you can't reduce any part of your body. Having an overall healthy diet, and then sure, yeah, if you're working out your abs, you're strengthening your core, which is going to help you with other things in your life. But there is no spot reduction. That is a fallacy. You can work out your arms, you can propel your wheelchair for miles and miles and build strength and everything, but the overall diet, if your diet is poor and you're overweight, you're never going to see that work that you did. You're not going to see the muscle definition.
Okay. All right. Next question. Another thing that they're concerned about is whether or how much muscle mass they may lose as a result of dieting. Can they maintain muscle mass while losing weight where they want to?
If you're getting enough calories and enough protein in your diet, you should be fine in maintaining your muscle mass. If you're not getting enough protein and you're not getting enough calories, then your body eventually is going to need to tap into something, and after time it will tap into your muscles. So, and I mean, I know for people who have anorexia, eventually it'll tap into your heart, which is a muscle, right? So getting enough protein. Don't watch my presentation on protein. That's pretty good there. Getting enough protein, which is not hard to do at all. Getting enough calories overall, and a nice healthy diet that should maintain your muscle.
Very good. And by the way, everyone, all of Shelley's previous presentations are in a video format on our website, nordcalsci.org. Go under the video tab, and you'll see a virtual video series there. And she's talked about everything that you might imagine. So
there's so much more to talk about, though, too. So much more.
All right, next question. For plant-based or vegan, do you recommend a protein supplement?
Okay, so if you're plant-based, so if you're vegan, that means you're not eating any animal products at all. So you're getting your protein from your beans, which are amazing. You're going to want to add in tofu, seitan, like you're going to want to add in all tempeh, all the proteins. If you're getting a huge range of plant-based protein, you could be fine. But if you don't like tofu and you don't like seitan, you don't know how to deal with tempeh, and you don't eat enough beans, you're going to need more protein. So then you could go to like a plant-based protein supplement. Sure. Just buy one that has not a bunch of junk and processed stuff in there. But yeah, that can be an issue. You gotta love the plant-based protein sources. that are out there that are just plants, and vary them, mix them up, and always include a ton of beans if you can, and beans are amazing. Obviously, I love beans.
We had this conversation at a previous presentation. How many types of beans are out there?
Oh, geez, I don't even remember that.
Like
the number's so big, I
think.
can't even remember it.
It was.
So many. And people only think of like the kidney beans, or pinto beans and garbanzo, and that's it. But there's so many other different beans. And don't forget lentils and you still get protein from peas and sugar snap peas and all of those, any of them. So mix it all up.
All right. Next question. I'm a quadriplegic, unable to cook for myself. I live in a dysfunctional household where my parents eat one type of food and my siblings another, neither which are healthy. Do you have any suggestions on how I could sort of rise to the occasion and sort of develop a healthier diet?
I'm assuming that your parents and your siblings are also your caregivers too. So I would start by giving them the facts, tell them the statistics, the research that points all in the way, like the way to cardiovascular disease and all the risks that arise from having a poor diet, especially with a spinal cord injury. And I don't know, it's kind of like a if you love me type thing, you just tell them, these are my risks and I want to live a long, healthy, happy life, and I need to be healthy, and I need your support. And you can also share the statistics with them that, the way that they're eating could lead to cardiovascular disease for them, and you love them too, and just lay it on really thick. And then, coming up with easy recipes and that kind of thing. Maybe they could watch the presentations with Arash in his kitchen and learn a little bit more about how to prepare easy. Oh my gosh, his foods are easy and amazing. And so watching some of that with them and just kind of get their buy-in and just let them know that you care about your health and you care about their health. And I hope that answered your question.
All right, then I'm going to be a little shameless by plugging Thursday night. Arash is going to be doing some healthy Mexican cuisine. That's our presentation on Thursday, 5 o'clock Pacific time. Still time to register for it and watch Arash do his magic, right?
Yes.
Straight out of his
tell your parents, instead of Taco Bell, you want to watch the presentation and learn how to make really healthy Mexican food instead of Taco Bell.
Very good. Okay, next question from obviously a caring mother. My son is T4 complete. He's 23 years old, 4 years out post-injury, was very athletic and in great shape. He has since put on 50 pounds, still very active, snowmobiles, works full-time in races, UTVs. What is the best way to approach him about losing weight? I feel it needs to be his decision, but I hate to harp on him, but it worries me more than his paralysis.
No, it's hard. It's hard because I can't ask you a bunch of questions I have to ask you. Again, with the buy-in though, statistics are not in his favor as far as his cardiovascular disease risk is higher. And if he enjoys all those sports, another benefit would be like being at a healthier weight is much easier to be mobile. It sounds like he's very active. And then again, like if you're the one that's doing the shopping, maybe you could learn a few healthy plant-based recipes and get his buy-in that way. Tempt him with his taste buds, that kind of thing, and bring in more fresh fruits and vegetables. I don't know if you pay for his food or if you, I don't know where it comes from. It's hard without talking to you, but maybe just have more fresh fruits and vegetables, and maybe just tell him that his performance in those sports will be greatly impacted if he focuses on improving his nutrition habits, and because he'll feel more energetic and he'll feel better and lighter, and it's a huge benefit to eating healthy. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Okay. Next question is Evelyn Tribole, the author of Intuitive Eating that you had mentioned?
Yes.
All right.
Yep, and Elise Reich. Just look up Intuitive Eating. I wish I had that book next to me. It's downstairs, but yes, Intuitive Eating. Evelyn Tribole is on there, and they're both dietitians. The book and the workbook, especially if you have a heavy past in yo-yo dieting or being on and off diets and like self-esteem issues with your body and just struggle all around. that book and workbook is fantastic, and you're going to think it's written for you if you've struggled with all those things. So that would be an excellent place to start.
Okay. By the way, that mother that was asking that question about her 24-year-old son, he lives on his own, so it's a little challenging for her to sort of influence his eating.
Share the
behavior.
information, share the research, the benefits and that kind of thing with him in a non-judgmental type way. That's what I would do, is just you're concerned. You're not trying to push him, but these are the statistics, and you want him to live a long, happy, healthy, active life. And nutrition plays a huge role, and it's often it's overlooked. People tend to go on medications before they change their diet, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, and I think also expose them. I mean, again, a shameless plug for Thursday night's presentation of Arash, but sometimes people don't think that they could cook those healthy meals. Again, Arash has demonstrated that time after time, and he will again on Thursday night. Just sort of empowers people to learn that they can cook a healthy meal without having to turn it into a 7-course meal. So
yeah, don't need to break the bank.
Yeah, maybe expose your son to presentations like that. Maybe that'll inspire him. One never knows what would take to inspire someone.
It could be, it could just be that he doesn't even know where to start, or maybe he thinks of healthy eating as boring. If he's young, he probably has no idea where to start when it comes to eating healthy. And it's actually quite simple. The simpler you get with your single ingredients, your whole foods, and learn how to prepare those and add a little flavor in there, it's really much easier than a lot of people think it is.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to ask Arash to join us here. He is on this presentation. Arash, can you join us and make any comments? Let's see if we can get him. There he is.
Hi.
Hi, Arash. How are you?
Hi. Sorry about that. I'm here.
No, good.
Just
so you've been
control
listening.
my 2 rowdy ones while I'm
Right. Sorry about
but I've
that.
been listening. I've been here for the whole thing. It was wonderful as always.
Good. Well, you've been hearing about these challenges of the quadriplegic living in that the dysfunctional household, and the young man who lives on his own, and his mother is sort of worried about his eating habits. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think as you both mentioned, I appreciate it. I try to structure all of my cooking sessions on things that are easy and doable. I think for the person who lived in the dysfunctional cooking household, I would say, really, really bring it down to basics, even just like 2 or 3 components for a meal. Maybe you just steam some rice, cook some frozen veggies out of the bag or something, microwave them in a bowl, and then eat some rice and veggies with like a tasty sauce. I mean, I know that sounds kind of boring, but your health is more important than anything else. And for us with spinal cord injury, it's that much more important. So I think again, the biggest challenge I find with everybody is the demystification, which is what I try to always educate about with my cooking sessions. So you guys just talked about it a moment ago with the mother educating the son. It's demystifying it. If they don't know where to begin, people just get lazy and they say, screw it, I'll just order food, or I'll get takeout, or I'll get pizza, or I'll do a frozen meal. And it's really not that hard. So yes, join for our upcoming session, watch any of our previous sessions. I feel like in my past videos, I presented some pretty easy to do things. And then if someone really wants some more guided advice, feel free to have them reach out to me. I'd be happy to at least point them towards some somewhat more simple solutions. It's actually something I've been thinking more about, creating some kind of system or guide. It's been brewing in the back of my mind. So yeah, just remember, does anybody like having a long bowel program, or feeling bloated, or feeling stuck? I mean, when you're in that position of eating is such a personal thing, and it's such an enjoyable thing. But what I always try to do is to create enjoyable eating that's also good for you. So people might have to reprogram their mind a little bit. You might have to learn to eat new things. You might find that you like a lot more things that you might not, but there's a lot of ways to go about it. It's not easy, but our health is so important. So
very good. And everyone,
Another thing
yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add really quick, a lot of my patients, I work on behavior modification and that kind of thing, and trying to get their buy-in for eating healthier. And it does take 3 or 4 weeks to establish a good habit. And if you give yourself like a solid month in trying to establish a healthy eating pattern, by that time, your energy levels and you're going to start to feel better. It's all going to kick in, and it's going to give you the motivation to keep going. But you have to get past this addiction to sugar and fat and salt that a lot of people have with processed and fast foods. And you get past that after 3 or 4 weeks and eating like a whole food, like plant-based diet. And the diet will sell itself to you. You'll automatically start to feel better after that time. So you just have to get over the hump.
Yeah, and what I was getting ready to say is that with Arash, he really goes out of his way to keep it simple in terms of the ingredients that he uses in his meals, because it'll take less time to cook and easier to cook as well, while still making a very healthy and nutritious meal. So again, Thursday night, Arash is going to be focusing on Mexican cuisine. So if you're not doing anything, 5 o'clock Pacific time is when we're going to be presenting it. Thank you, Shelley. Thanks, Arash. Sorry to get you away from the kids, but we look forward to seeing you on Thursday night. Thanks, everyone. Again, thanks to the Reef Foundation for making these presentations possible. And also, just know that tomorrow morning in your inbox, there will be a link to the recording of tonight's presentation so that you could kind of review it and also share it with others around you. Have a good night and look forward to seeing as many of you as possible on Thursday night. Take care.